All right, guys, back again. Q&A. This week's going to be a fun kind of an answer to the question, and it's going to be the question is, how do we use set intensifiers within programming?
Don't use them. No. It's like, oh my gosh, the shocker, right? So I guess first question is like, are they more effective? Should you be using them? What level should you be using them at? So I believe that you should start with straight sets and be able to truly master the straight set and using quality form and making sure you're getting quality volume out of one set before you even move on to doing some type of further intensifier. So I have a lot of people that they'll say, I'm going to do a drop set. They do like 10 easy reps. They drop weight and then they go on to do this drop set with more reps. It's like, well, what were you even doing on your first set? What was the purpose of that first set if you're leaving all these reps in the tank? You haven't even maximized your stimulus in one set before you go on to this next set. So that's I guess my point is like making sure your first straight set that you're doing, you're giving a maximal stimulus and effort is what we're really talking about here.
And that's going to be across the board, right? So you want to be looking at maximizing your straight sets as well, in the sense in which the form that you use creates the most mechanical tension per rep that you can, like without overly affecting output. Now, we're bodybuilders, we're not powerlifters, we're not trying to move from A to B. So if you can master that really high level of tension per rep within those straight sets and taking those to failure, then I think that, in my opinion, and that's when you earn the right to use these kind of set intensifiers. Now, the frequency at which you use them and the goal at which you use them is going to kind of debate, but I'm going to be honest, most of the times we're probably looking at using this with some kind of metabolite build-up goal behind it.
Right. So you gotta say, why? That's always a great question. Any programming you do, if you can ask yourself, why are you doing it? That might give you some clarity into if you even should be doing it. So with these intensifiers, the main purpose would be to further accumulate metabolites. As we know, there might be some contribution to metabolic stress, the cell swelling effect, and that could have some signaling for hypertrophy. As we have spoken on a lot before, we know like the bigger contributor is giving an appropriate volume dosage of mechanical attention, right, within quality sets. So that's always the primary for your training. Should be I believe a majority of good quality straight sets with a high effort level producing a lot of attention. But these intensifiers can work on some other areas to increase metabolic stress because you have these shorter rest intervals. And so you're not pulling off as much localized fatigue, so that you're not going to be able to perform as much in subsequent sets. Ideally, that's not what you always want, right? You want a good performance throughout your sets, but for a purpose of metabolite accumulation and cell swelling, it works really well.
And so let's talk about if you're going to use them, where are you going to place them in the program? Now, this is a question that I get a lot of times, or even a comment back when I send plans sometimes, is like they read it on paper and they're like, that's it? Or something along those lines. I'm like, yeah, that's it. And I was like, if you do it right, like it's going to be plenty. But if we're looking to use them, where am I using them? So one thing you got to look at is your distribution of volume across the session, right? So if we're training chest and we've got six sets of chest for the session, we're probably not going to want to use it within those first 4 to 5 sets of chest for the day, because then you're going to be negatively affecting the output of the ones that precede it, right? So when I put them in, I'm typically putting them as the last set of the day for that body part. A consideration too with that is a lot later in the session, because we've gotten rid of our output type of movements. And then one reason that I will maybe use them a little earlier than I plan is for people on a type of time crunch type of a thing.
Yeah, I would bring up with that one point is like someone might do these intensifiers first for like an isolation movement before moving into a press. Like chest, like, all right, I'm going to do like some drop sets on a fly before moving into a press. And it's like, well, I'm pre-fatiguing my chest before going into a bench press. And what's actually happening is that you're going to be having a stronger contribution from your other muscle groups in the pressing. So you're actually going to be giving a better stimulus for your like shoulders and triceps when you go to your press, when you're pre-fatiguing your pecs in a fly, right? So that wouldn't be a good application. So like you said, programming your isolations and maybe the isolation movements are a good application for a set intensifier.
Yeah, and with that, you're wanting not only probably isolations, but things you can externalize stability to. Machine work, something that's going to allow you to not have to, as you get extremely fatigued into the set intensifier, worry about stabilization as being an issue. So, for legs, you're thinking like leg curls, quad extensions. For chest, you're thinking like pec decks, things along those natures, where stabilizing the weight is externalized into the machine that you're using.
Yeah, awesome. Don't do like a triple drop set on a barbell squat. Like your form is going to go to shit. It's going to be all like breathing issues, and the effort level within each set is going to be dropped off within the muscle itself, right? It's going to be fucking hard, but that's not why we're training, just to make shit hard. I can make stuff hard, but we want like to give an adequate stimulus within a set. So just like you said, man, like isolation movements are a good place within machines where you can have very good bracing. So let's get into like what would be a good way to structure it. And I think supersets are used a lot. I think it's like starting there, like how would you structure like a superset within a plan?
Most of the time it's going to be not the same muscle group, right? So, and most people connotate superset with the same type of muscle group. So a lot of times I'll even write it as like a compound set or whatever in there so that they distinguish the difference. So you're looking at like for legs, you maybe choose like a quad extension and a leg curl as your superset together. Now, one thing to consider here is I don't overly program supersets anymore where we're going straight from one into the other. There's some research out there that shows that probably the optimal rest period time is going to be around that 2-minute mark. I know Schoenfeld has a rather recent study in the past 2 to 3 years that showed that 2 minutes was about the best point to kind of maximize output, but still have that metabolite effect. So I guess that's kind of where I write compound sets a lot of times is it'll be like quad extension to 1 minute and a half, a minute and a half to 2-minute rest. And then we're doing leg curl and we're going back and forth.
I want to make sure what you just said is like driven home for people about why we are saying straight sets over like rest pause on everything is because the longer rest periods around 2 minutes versus 30 seconds, 1 minute are showing greater hypertrophy than the shorter rest periods. So the majority of your program, you should be using these adequate rest period times. But anyway, go on. Sorry, I didn't want to jump in.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's a perfect thing. And I think we need to kind of understand too that if I remember the Schoenfeld study correct, it's been such a long time since I read it. Some of the exercise selection was kind of debatable in the sense that if you're doing like a deadlift or a squat or an RDL, that 2-minute time period might not be exactly on the 2 minutes, right? Your ability to breathe at 2 minutes sometimes when you really put all out on some of those is not going to be there at 2 minutes. I know my fat ass can't breathe until like 3 minutes on some hack squat sets. So but make sure that you adjust it to the intensity of the exercise. But as a general rule of thumb, 2 minutes is a pretty good marker across most exercises because we do need to maximize that output. So now back to the kind of the superset thing. If I have somebody that's really on a time crunch, supersets are always going to be opposing muscle group, bicep, tricep, quad, hamstring, whatever, something that's not the same body part, just because I'm fine with needing to get things in and not extending your sessions out too far, but I'm still not trying to. And one thought within that even is which one's the priority? I'm going to put that one as the first in the superset, right? If I have someone who's got sick quads, but hamstrings that look like, they're smooth as hell, I'm going to use hamstring as the first movement in that superset. And I'm going to do a hamstring to a quad exercise. So just thinking how you do it.
Yeah, I think even if you're able to, like, you don't have to jump straight into it, your next superset. Even giving yourself 30-second rest just to catch your breath a little bit so you can still put good effort into that second exercise is important. So I'm usually doing more of a zigzag approach, right? So some days I'll do my side delt work, and I'll do calf work, but I'll do like a minute rest between. I'm just going back and forth. It's not overly, I'm not gassed. I'm able to recover enough, but also the opposing muscle groups aren't getting quality diminished from volume. And I think I saw some study, just like we're talking about, like grouped versus paired supersets. And when you're pairing the same muscle group, there's actually like a greater amount of muscle damage that occurs. Which that's not really what we're going for. It's more of a side effect from training. Possibly it could have some implications for like a stimulus, but that might weigh into recovery issues if you're doing like, pairing your muscle groups up like that. But hey, if you don't have the time and that's how you need to structure it, well, shit, get your volume in, because that's going to be better than not getting the volume in, right? So I think that's when it's a good purpose. I think that covered superset well. How about implementing like drop sets?
Yeah, it's going to be that same thing I kind of mentioned before. Very, very end of the session, strictly metabolite based training. We've already finished our output movements. I'm a little partial to metabolite training, I guess, doing some stuff around BFR labs and stuff. I do think it's beneficial. So if I'm using them, they're going to be later in the session, and that's even going to be with rest pauses too. Like I understand that the premise of rest pause is like, we're resting in order to recruit high threshold muscle fibers. But at the same time, like that rest period in there for rest pause is still very metabolite based. So rest pauses, drop sets later in the session. We've already done, and my basic structure for a session is going to be prime, load, blood flow. So prime being doing whatever you got to do to get ready for your main movements, whether that's like, mobility work, whatever. Load your main movements, blood flow, very end of the session where we're maximizing that pump and metabolite accumulation.
And it's honestly, like for my isolations, usually I just move into a higher rep range, and that serves its purpose as like a blood flow pump type of movement. And possibly like maybe as you get more advanced, like that same stimulus just isn't quite there, and you can move into using more of these advanced techniques, like a drop set every now and then. I think just use them as a tool every now and then to do them. You don't have to do them like every single session. If recovery's on point and you got it that day, sure, add one in, but you don't always have to do it. I was listening to John Meadows just talk about this, and he's like, if you got it for the day, like go for it, so using some auto regulation just to know when you should be pushing it or you shouldn't. But I think for the most part, I would use these things kind of sparingly.
Yeah, learn to really take it to the limit, maximize your volume there, and then utilize it as needed. I think that's a great point on the rep range. Like that's typically sufficient enough. Like I don't care what you say. If you do a 20 set of leg press, you're done. Like you ain't getting more blood flow in there no matter what you do.
No.
So take that into consideration. Use them sparingly. I know that's probably not the answer you wanted to hear today, but that's just kind of how we do it and how we honestly believe. I hope you kind of grasp the thought process behind it, because there is reasons why. We're not just saying like don't do them. They are useful. Just use them when necessary.